happy to see you. This is the first time I've given this talk, so it's an inaugural talk. And I usually do what we call the charismatic megafauna, which are things like black bears, you know, the bigger animals, bald eagles. But hey, we all need to know about squirrels. They're probably the one critter we all see the most. So anyway, I want to thank Matt and Sharon. I think you guys have a great forum here, and the people in Bloomfield are very lucky to be able to benefit from this. And I think I'll come into that climate change talk myself. As Sharon said, I am a master wildlife conservationist with DEEP. The program was suspended during COVID and probably will start up again soon. We take a training of 40 hours, learning all about mostly fur-bearing animals, and then we have to volunteer 40 hours the next year, and then 20 years thereafter. 20 hours every year thereafter. I'm pretty much done with 40 hours after January. But anyway, I really take it seriously because I think it's important that people have some understanding of our wildlife, our environment, and how we can all coexist and really enjoy the fact that Connecticut is so replete with such a wonderful flora and fauna. So anyway, here we go. I'm going to share my screen and let me go to the slideshow. And Sharon, I call this the good, the bad, and the squirrely.
Love it.
So anyway, let me hide my video. Hold on. Okay. All right. So a lot of these pictures are mine, and the ones that aren't, I will tell you. So anyway, the good, the bad, and the squirrely. Wait a minute to go back. Sorry, I got to go back there. The squirrel family, from the tiny chipmunks to gray, red, and flying squirrels to even big prairie dogs, is one of the most widespread on Earth. There are around 300 species of squirrels that can glide through the air, outwit rattlesnakes, and survive the coldest temperatures of most mammals. They live in a range of habitats, from the forest canopy to the Arctic tundra to the baking hot desert. In Connecticut, the eastern gray squirrel, which you see here on the left, is ubiquitous, seen and heard everywhere, it seems. It is beloved, it is bewildering, it is abhorred and adored. The territorial red squirrel announces its presence vociferously when someone enters its space. It's out only at night, so a lot of people have never seen it unless they've had trouble with it in their attics or in their chimneys. It is sassy, showy, and magnificently adorned in red fur. The southern and northern flying squirrels, which Connecticut has both, are nocturnal marvels of our forests, and they can glide from one tree to another up to 120 feet. It's elusive, but also fascinating, with big eyes, a membrane of skin, which you can see there on the right, that allows it to glide. And it has an interspecies gregariousness. This is a flying squirrel I saw, like a whole group of them. It's called a scurry in the forest up near me. And they were just all over the place that night. So it was pretty crazy. Most Connecticut mammals are not readily observed unless you make an effort to find them or keep food sources out in your yard, which DEEP does not recommend from late March until late November. However, the eastern gray squirrel is one mammal you can count on seeing regularly. They have always been numerous throughout the state. Other nut-munching, skittering critters we will explore in this talk share common traits with the gray squirrel, but also have their own unique characteristics. I'm sure most of you have had a squirrel peering in your window, asking for a handout. Are you talking about me? Recently, I told friends that January 21st was National Squirrel Day, then followed a long discussion on why they do not like squirrels or chipmunks, how they do not want them around, and how in the world can they get rid of them. I told them that there is a National Squirrel Day, maybe because squirrels are adorable and extremely fun to watch. Maybe it's the many hats they wear, not real hats. Please don't put hats on squirrels. What I mean is they play a variety of roles. They are acrobats, bandits, gardeners, tricksters, and an ecological contributor, and much, much more. I set out to discover why these creatures are worthy of their own day. And after you read the facts I found, you might just appreciate squirrels of all stripes. So one day I was lucky enough, I have a big Norway spruce in my yard, and in the distance is People's State Forest. I was lucky enough to get 3 squirrels of different colors. So the top is a red squirrel, the right is a gray squirrel, and the left is a black squirrel, which is a part of a gray squirrel, which we will talk about. The red, again, the other one not pictured that we do have in Connecticut is the flying squirrel. Both gray and red squirrels are common and abundant in Connecticut. The gray squirrels and red squirrels are found everywhere. And again, while they're seen during the day, the flying squirrels are nocturnal and generally only seen at night or down your chimney. Red squirrels sometimes are called pine squirrels or chickarees because of the noise they tend to make. The gray squirrel is also known as the eastern gray squirrel. Both are members of the squirrel family, along with flying squirrels, chipmunks, and woodchucks. And don't you forget about us. So these were 2 of the flying squirrels I saw that night. So you can see they have very large eyes, and we'll discuss why that is. So the eastern gray squirrel, I took 5 years of Latin, but I don't pronounce it very well. So I always put it up here for you to read. So anyway, get out of my bird feeder and that pesky squirrel are things I hear a lot from people. Much maligned and set upon by humans and most predators, gray squirrels are medium-sized tree climbing squirrels. It is the largest of the Connecticut squirrels. The individuals can weigh between 1 to 1.5 pounds. The sexes look very similar. The adults average 15 to 20 inches in total length, and their tails average 6 to 9.5 inches. Typically, they are kind of a grizzled or light gray. They have white on the chin, throat, and belly. Melanistic black individuals are present in many areas in Connecticut. They used to be up in Westfield, Mass. a lot. You would be guaranteed to see them up there, but now they're around in Connecticut. And on occasion, leucistic eastern gray squirrels have appeared in the state. A gray squirrel that, because of the role of that genetic dice, isn't able to produce melanin. So the substance, that's the substance that gives color to fins, feathers, fur, and skin. So there you get this white gray squirrel from the deep photographer Paul Fusco, who just retired and will be greatly missed. So those are the 2 variations on the eastern gray squirrel. The gray squirrels occur from, as you can see, southern Quebec, New Brunswick, and Ontario to Florida. They go west into eastern Texas and north into southern Manitoba. They have been introduced, I'm not sure why, into Washington State, British Columbia, and Vancouver Island. So the gray squirrel has always been numerous throughout the state. It inhabits deciduous woodlands when abundant, yet it can adapt and disperse as these woodlands had been cleared for houses, agriculture, and industry. They eat a variety of mast, which is hard fruit, nuts, including acorns, hickory nuts, beech nuts, butternuts, along with berries, mushrooms, maple seeds, and some field crops such as corn. They also will readily take advantage of your sunflower seeds and other foods offered at backyard bird feeders. They're very good at figuring out whatever traps you've set so they can't get to the feeders, as most of you, I'm sure, know. Populations of gray squirrels can change dramatically in just a few years, depending on the food supply. These tree-dwelling rodents, yes, they are rodents, are agile climbers and jumpers. They have a very keen sense of sight, smell, and hearing, which really helps protect them. They're always alert. You can watch them, you'll see they're pretty alert unless they've been fed a lot. Nervous and wary, especially when they're on the ground. And when danger is near, they quickly skedaddle to the safety of trees. They're somewhat sociable and they can tolerate other squirrels nearby. These are red oak acorns, and they tend to germinate in the spring. The gray squirrel is active year-round, but needs tree cavities for shelter during the harsh weather. It does not hibernate. In the fall, they'll gather and bury randomly a winter food supply. Oftentimes they forget where they put them, so some other animal usually benefits. It is some of their food supply, since they have so many caches all over the place they can use as needed. They can sniff the ground until a buried nut is found. But they do lose about 25% of their buried food to thieves. And that's just from members of their own species. They're called scatter hoarders. That means animals with multiple caches of food. They have a difficult time keeping an eye on all of their hidden food. And besides, what could a squirrel do if some larger mammal was trying to get it? Fellow squirrels or birds often take advantage of this for a free meal, and they do like to raid your bird feeders. Squirrel habitat is low to mid-elevation environments of coniferous, mixed conifer, and hardwood forest containing large trees for denning and finding food such as acorns. Who made this red streaking on the trees? This is called gray squirrel striping. It's a communication activity between squirrels. Many hunters mistake this for deer rubs and will argue with you, but I can guarantee to you these are gray squirrel striping on a tree. Individual homes for squirrels ranges vary from 1 to 100 acres, depending on the season and availability of food. This year, there weren't a lot of acorns around, so they were having to scurry around and get other types of nuts to cache away. They move within their range according to, as I said, the availability of food. They will seek mass-bearing forests, so just like other mammals in the fall, black bear, deer, other animals like that are always trying to find the forest with the nuts because they're very high in calories. They'll also go to cornfields in the fall. They'll eat the tender buds of maple trees or favored in the spring. During the fall, though, these squirrels may travel 50 miles or more in search of better habitat. So the populations of squirrels regulate regularly. When their numbers are high, squirrels, especially gray squirrels, may go on mass immigrations, and many of them will die then. During successive years of a good acorn production, squirrel populations reach high levels. If the food supplies are low, the population decreases substantially. Historically, there have been reports of extensive migrations in Connecticut of squirrels. There was one migration reported in 1933 when 1,000 or more swam across the Connecticut River between Hartford and Essex. Although the exact cause of these migrations is known, it is most likely tied to limited food supply. And yes, squirrels can swim. Unsinkable will swim if dropped by predator or as an escape. I was paddling out on Hogback Reservoir, and this red-tailed hawk was flying across the reservoir and dropped this little squirrel. And it swam and swam. We tried to catch up with it to rescue it, but it made it to the other side. So most gray squirrels can jump 8 feet if they have to from a stationary position. And much of their acrobatics and dexterity are used to escape predators, as you see with this red-tailed hawk. And thank to Dave Swanson from Country Magazine for letting me use this photo. Squirrels, unlike chipmunks, as I said, do not hibernate. This time of year, they look a little bulky. They increase their body mass as one way to stay warm during the winter. They are what scientists call non-hibernating homeotherms, which requires them to maintain a relatively stable core body temperature under various environmental conditions, 98.6 to 100 degrees. By shivering, gray squirrels can generate heat at a rate 10.3 times greater than their predicted standard metabolic weight, thus helping them survive even the harshest weather conditions. So I'm sure you've seen them out in the snow and wondering about that. Another interesting thing, the positioning of the tail above the back can increase the insulative value of their fur or act as a heat shield and reduce the uptake of heat from the environment. So as I said, most animals have characteristics that make them very well adapted to where they live. Winter food comes in many forms. Although they do have a super keen sense of smell that allows them to dig up buried nuts and seeds, they also eat buds and bark. And they will take any frozen food if they find it, and of course, bird seed. Squirrels do provide entertainment for wintertime wildlife watchers as they appear to take winter in stride. However, survival is a deadly game in the cold. Gray squirrels rarely breed before they're 10 months old. They mate in late winter and spring. Their reproductive success is highly variable and dependent on demographic and environmental factors. And most of that a lot of times comes down to food. After a 44-day gestation period, females give birth to a litter of 2 to 7 young. They call them kits or pups. They weigh less than a half an ounce. They're blind up until they're 5 or 6 weeks old and helpless at birth. They're weaned and somewhat independent at 8 to 10 weeks. The second litter is usually born in July. Their nests are often in a tree cavity or constructed of leaves suspended in treetops. I always tell people when I'm out taking them on a hike, if you see up high in a tree just this mass of leaves and just the messiest looking bunch of nesting, then that's probably a squirrel's nest. Our birds of prey are a little neater in making their nest. These leaf nests are used for temporary protection against inclement weather or predators. By the time they're 1 year old, squirrels have reached 92% of their maximum body mass. Typically, about half the squirrels in a population die each year from predators like hawks, owls, coyotes, bobcats, and snakes. They all eat squirrels. They also can fall to parasite diseases, and they even fall out of trees and can be killed that way. And of course, human car strikes also threaten squirrels, particularly in the autumn when they are preparing their winter cache. And in Connecticut, unfortunately, all of our mammals end up significant roadkill. Our roads are dark here, so if you're out at night, it's hard to see animals, and frankly, I think people drive too fast that you can't stop in time. And some, of course, animals dart and you can't stop. I mean, there's obviously those times. So at birth, the eastern gray squirrel has a life expectancy of 2 years. In the wild, the maximum recorded lifespan for a gray squirrel is 12. But in captivity, as most animals, they can live up to 20 years. The squirrel's forefront teeth grow about 10 inches a year, so they have to keep gnawing on things to keep them sharp. More fun facts about squirrels. They really should get, I think, like an action hero movie deal, because they have a superhero-like talent to reach seemingly inaccessible bird feeders. And that comes from another ability, not only being acrobatic, but they can rotate their hind feet 180 degrees. One major complaint of gray squirrels, and particularly from people too deep, is the disruption they cause at bird feeders. Feeders should be placed in an area where squirrels cannot gain access to them, far away from shrubs and overhanging tree branches. This is true for other animals too, even for like black bears. Mounting the feeder on a metal pole at least 6 feet high and attaching a metal cone-shaped baffle to the pole will help thwart squirrels from reaching it. A neighbor of mine kept putting olive oil on her pole. It was a basketball pole, and the squirrels would slide down it, but she quickly realized she'd just have to have gallons and gallons of it because all kinds of animals would come and lick the pole. So anyway, they are master thieves, and obstacles seem to be a challenge for them. And as with most critters in the world, life is all about the food. If you've seen a squirrel on the ground run for cover, you may noted how they tend to spiral up a tree trunk, making them hard to see as they escape. An annoyed or alarmed squirrel will flick its tail and holler, "Chee, chee, chee." I can't really do squirrel, but I'll play it in a minute, from the safety of a high branch. So hopefully this plays, we'll see. You heard that right, Matt?
Yeah, we heard it.
Okay, all right. Oh, sorry, it never shuts off. So anyway, so management. So a lot of people have problems with squirrels. I did one talk on bobcats at another land trust in another part of the state, and they loved their squirrels. And this guy kept interrupting the talk. There were 5 bobcats in my yard, and they kept killing my cute critters, and he kept going and going, and finally some members quieted him down. Yeah, bobcat do like like to eat squirrels, but I kind of doubted they would have had 5 altogether, adults altogether, as he said, but the mother could have been with the kids. But anyway, so there are a lot of nuisance problems and calls made about squirrels. They can get into your attic. They bite holes into your roofing. A lot of homeowners complain. They will readily take up access into a building if they can get there, if there are eaves or crawl spaces available. They'll gnaw, scratch, and you might hear gnawing, scratching, pattering sounds in the early morning or daylight hours, and that usually signals that you might have something besides a mouse up there. They're quite a bit louder than a mouse. They'll tear insulation, cardboard. You might find some leaves and nests, and the young could be totally concealed in the eaves or wall spaces. But they can damage attic insulation and electrical wiring. And if you do have that issue, you need to, they'll have to be removed. If you want to block holes to prevent squirrels and other animals from gaining access, be sure, obviously, that none are trapped inside. They can cause severe damage if their young are trapped inside and they're trying to get in there. If chewing persists, you can use heavy 1/2-inch wire mesh, and that can be temporarily placed over the problem area. They're not beavers, so they can't really chew through that very easily. Trimming shrubs and vines around the house, pruning overhanging tree limbs may discourage squirrels from causing problems in the home. Bright lights or noise from radios oftentimes help. Gray squirrels, they're highly excitable. They can cause severe damage, as I said, if they're trapped inside a building. If they're in a room and frightened, they'll run around the room with reckless abandon. They knocking over anything in their way, although they are small, so they can't knock over everything. By quickly and quietly opening a door or window to the outside and leaving the room, you'll give the squirrel its best chance to get out. To free a squirrel trapped in a chimney, you can lower a heavy rope down the chimney, and that gives a means for the animal to climb out. Drop the other end of the rope to the ground to avoid another trip to the roof to retrieve it after the squirrel is left. So there are things you can do. Most of these you can Google and find out. You can also go to the DEEP website, and it will give you more ideas. Live trapping gray squirrels using metal box traps at least 2 feet long is the most effective way to remove them. You can use a have-a-heart trap, bait apple chunks, peanut butter, various nuts, and heavily traveled routes are on rooftops, along porch railings, or in the attic. Once traps, you should quickly release them, go a ways away. A lot of animals can travel a long distance to get back, but never touch the animal with your hands. If you had to, you'd have to have very thick gloves. So we always advise not to touch it. You can simply open the cage and let it loose. There are preventable measures from keeping squirrels out of your attic. You'll want to make your attic extremely unattractive and uncomfortable for nesting squirrels. To do this, here's some of the things. Secure garbage cans to limit more sources of food. This is true for all kinds of animals, including black bears. Cut the tree limbs back around the houses so squirrels do not have easy access to the roof. Check your chimney cap and make sure it doesn't need to be replaced. And repair any rotting wood on that causes, I don't know what I did there, but repair any rotting wood on your rooftop. Sorry about that. So with the exception of the flying squirrel, North American red squirrels are the smallest species of tree squirrel in North America. And look at that Latin name. It measures about 11 to 14 inches from nose to the tip of the tail, and it weighs about 7 to 8 ounces, so pretty small. The fur on its back and sides is brownish red, and the underparts are white. It has a black stripe separating the two colors, particularly in the summer. Their ear tufts sometimes have them. This is a younger red squirrel, so it does not have them. And the ear tufts are also brownish red. I was privileged to see red squirrels hiking in Scotland a couple of years, and they're a little different than ours, but boy, they have really tall ear tufts. They're pretty cute. They have a prominent white eye ring, as you can see, and their tail is usually a little redder with gray and white flecks. In the summer, again, that black stripe is more pronounced along its side. Both males and females are about equal in size. The bushy tail is somewhat more slender than the gray squirrel and almost as long as the length of its head and body combined. They're very unsociable. They don't want you anywhere near their woods nor any other critter. I've seen them even chase a black bear. They're highly territorial and aggressive. They'll not tolerate their own or other squirrel species in their territories. They can also be very noisy and are sometimes nicknamed chatterboxes. So here's their range. Their distribution ranges from Alaska, the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Quebec, south as far as the Rocky Mountains, New Mexico and Arizona in the west, and the Appalachian Mountains of South Carolina in the east. Their life expectancy lives 5 years, though they have great difficulty surviving their first year. 9 years is the longest recorded wild red squirrel lifespan. They feed mainly on seeds of coniferous trees, but they also eat mushrooms. A lot of these little critters eat mushrooms, insects, bird eggs, nestlings, and a wide range of other items. In forest habitats, they create what are called middens, which are the accumulation of cone scales and debris left from their feeding. They typically only feed at 1 or 2 favorite places within their territory, and the debris pile can pile up to considerable depths, also with their scat included, which is our term for poop. The midden is used as a storage area. They cache cones there. They do eat pine cones. It's likely provides a cool, moist microenvironment, which helps the seed storage. The midden and the territory surrounding it is the center of activity, and they're vigorously defended from all intruders by these little squirrels. Each territory is occupied by a single squirrel, with the exception of females with young. Midden sites may be occupied by a succession of different squirrels for decades. They become sexually mature at about 1 year of age. Their breeding season begins in midwinter, usually in February or March, and continues into summer. The females are in estrus for less than a day, and they may be pursued and or solicit the attentions of several males since she doesn't have much time. This activity often leads to very raucous breeding chases involving many squirrels that may last for several hours. And I can tell you it's a sight to see. The females usually have 1 and sometimes 2 litters per year, typically with 3 to 5 young per litter. As is the case with a lot of small animals, rodents, like mice, rabbits aren't so small, but a lot of animals that are preyed upon a lot tend to have more offspring because that gives them a little chance that they'll have more to survive. The young are born after a 35-day gestation period. They're nursed in the nest for about 45 days before they come out. They might stay with their mother for several weeks or months before moving away to establish their own territories. In some instances, the mother may relinquish a portion of her territory to one or more of her offspring and move to establish a new territory herself. This happens a lot with females. I keep mentioning black bears, but very similar. The sows will tolerate their female offspring to stay in their territories roughly while they chase off the males. The juvenile mortality in red squirrel is high. In other populations, about 50% of the juveniles will die before they reach the age of 6 months. And another 25 to 30% typically do not survive to the end of their first year. But once they establish the territory, the average life expectancy is about 3 years. They have a lot of predators, including avian species like northern goshawks, short-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks, red-tailed hawks, great horned owls, and other mammalian species like fox and bobcats. So they really have to be careful. These tree-dwelling rodents, they are very agile climbers and jumpers. Like other squirrels, they have a keen sense of smell, sight, and hearing. A lot of animals with really good eyesight in proportion to their body have very large eyes, and you can see they do. They are diurnal, which means they're active during the day, although they may occasionally be active during the night. Their activity patterns are very strongly influenced by weather. patterns. High winds, rain, snow, and low temperatures will reduce their activity significantly, where they will not be so with gray squirrels. They do not hibernate during the winter months, and most of their activity during this time of year occurs during midday hours when temperatures are highest. In summer, squirrels are most active during early morning and late afternoon hours, and in the spring and fall, their activity levels are equally distributed throughout the daylight hours. So again, with them, it's also all about the food. Snow's out. It's very fun to go. We had about 9 inches where I live, on to about 3 inches. So we got a fair amount of snow. These are red squirrel tracks. Look a lot bigger, don't they, going up to a tree. This is another interesting thing. I was doing a tracking certification and took these pictures. This is a mushroom munched on by a red squirrel. All these little rodents munch things differently. And if you're going to get certified in tracking, you have to know all the different ways they munch. So I'm showing you just a few things. Red squirrels, again, are highly territorial. They'll vigorously defend their areas and their hoard of food by using vocalizations and chasing intruders away. They not only attempt to keep red squirrels and other competitors at bay, but they will exhibit territorial defense behaviors against predator species. The most common is a vocalization called a chatter. This serves to announce the presence of an individual to its neighbors, warning them to stay away and avoid costly aggressive encounters. So you see in front of you a few more things they have: the bark or chirp, the screech, the growl, the squeak. I'm sure most of you have heard it. So flying squirrels, pretty neat name. All these pictures are flying squirrel photos I took. In Connecticut, we have the northern and the southern flying squirrels. The southern, go figure, is the most numerous. Its scientific name there translates literally into flying gray mouse, and it does look kind of mouse-like. So the first, glaucomes, is for gray mouse and volans for flying. The southern species is smaller. It's about 8 to 10 inches in length. Northern flying squirrels are about 10 to 12 inches long. They're mostly in northwestern Connecticut. These squirrels range throughout the eastern half of the U.S. in deciduous forest habitat. The northern squirrel, again, it does look similar, but is larger. It's present along the northern edges of Connecticut. But the southern squirrel is found throughout the state. But because of their nocturnal nature, they are rarely seen, so getting a population count is difficult. This night that I was out, I counted 25 different flying squirrels. They are pretty gregarious with each other. The southern flying squirrel was considered a common resident during the early 1900s and is still common. There were no numbers really kept prior to that time that were found. Flying squirrels might more appropriately be called gliding squirrels because they aren't capable of true powered flight like a bird or a bat. They glide. They have a special membrane, you see there, between their front and back legs that allow them to glide through the air between trees. When a flying squirrel wants to travel to another tree without touching the ground, it launches itself from a pretty high branch and spreads out its limbs so that membrane is exposed. It uses very slight movements with its legs to steer, and the tail actually acts as a brake when it reaches its destination. Pretty incredible to see. They can cover up to 120, 150 feet in a single glide, and oftentimes they will launch themselves off to escape predators. Mating for them occurs in winter, and after a 40-day gestation period, an average of 3 to 4 young are born. A second breeding occurs in the summer, also, giving them more chance for survival. The young are born blind and helpless, but they do develop more quickly than other squirrels. By 6 weeks, they're able to forage on their own. Tree cavities, even birdhouses, may be used as nesting sites. And yes, you can build a flying squirrel house. I think that's a pretty cool thing to do. But some people don't want them around. But if you build them a house, maybe they'll go there rather than in your attic or down your chimney. One night I was sitting in my living room and I didn't have my fire on, thank goodness. And I thought something was looking at me, and I looked up. I live in a 1760 house, and there was this flying squirrel looking right at me with those big, big eyes. Southern flying squirrels, as I said, are the most common in Connecticut. The fur on top is grayish brown. Their underbelly is white. Along their sides, they have that flap of skin running, and it's used for gliding. When it isn't flying, the flap is kind of scrunched up and may not be as noticeable. You can see that on the top squirrel to the left. They have a 3 to 4 inch tail that, unlike the eastern and red squirrels, is not bushy at all. They're very small. They weigh between 1 and 4 ounces. Their black eyes look large in proportion to their heads, and that gives them kind of a cute babyish appearance, I think. Southern flying squirrels, they're active year round. In very cold weather, they become torpid and they might stay in their nest for a while, but it's not true hibernation. They do nest in tree cavities, nesting boxes, and they will nest communally. As many as 50 squirrels have been found together, gathered in the winter, obviously getting the heat sources from each other. That helps them keep warm. They use nesting material like lichens, and they also eat that, especially over the winter. The summer nests, they have leaves and twig bundles built. They're much smaller leaf nests than are created by gray squirrels. Again, they're nocturnal and therefore often go unseen by humans, even if they are in your backyard. As you can see here, their eyes are pretty big in relation to their head. Big round eyes are one reason why flying squirrels look so cute to humans. Anything with large eyes like teddy bears or other stuffed animals, we really love with those big eyes. While this trait typically indicates infancy in mammals, like wide eyes that endear us to babies and puppies, flying squirrels retain these disproportionately plump peepers into adulthood. They evolved big eyes to collect more light for better night vision and adaptation that is also shared by many nocturnal animals, from owls to lemurs. Here is an acorn, and this is how a flying squirrel chews it. And yes, if you're trying to get certified in tracking, you have to know that this was chewed by a flying squirrel. That flying squirrel scat there, and again, they'll leave the debris of what they've eaten all together at the bottom of a tree, maybe where they live. So that's what this is. Here's 2 others, more flying squirrel gnaws on the right, bottom right there. Those are these little carrying notches they make so they can carry it easier in their teeth. So pretty incredible. Again, here's another picture of them. Again, they actually glide rather than fly. So it's pretty spectacular to see. Mother squirrels can either even transport babies while gliding, and that would really be something to see. Listen at night for the calls of the high-pitched flying squirrels. Hope you'll hear this because this is very peepy and quiet. So if you're sitting out, sorry, I wanted to go, whoops, I didn't mean to, hold on. Let me get back. Well, we're basically over, but let me get back. So if you're sitting outside at night, you can actually, if you listen, you can hear the wings of bats go over you. They make little peeps, and you can probably hear the peeps of flying squirrels. So anyway, that's what I have. Why haven't fox squirrels made it into the East Coast? They're very abundant in Ohio. You know what, Jan, I'm not sure about that, but it'll be a good question for me to figure out. I would say in probably not their habitat, but not sure. So the gray squirrels, Kevin, do their tree stripping with their mouths and with their claws, even though they're pretty small, but a lot of it they're gnawing down the tree and stripping that bark. They do get a little nutrient from that bark. What do they use their tails for? David, one of the things is they use the tail for is for balance. A lot of animals that have tails, people think that possum hang from their tails all the time. They don't really hang very long from their tails. They do use them for balancing, and that's the same with the squirrels and other animals with long tails. But they do use their tails for insulation, for heat in the winter. They'll pull those tails up over their back, and it also helps them with the cools them down a little in the summer, from the sun. So they're not just kind of there for show, but they do get pretty bushy. But I've seen a lot of squirrels, and when it snows, they'll just kind of sit out in the snow and whip that tail like right over their back into their heads. So that's what they use it for. So any more questions?
So I don't see any more. Are squirrels territorial? Like, do they get into fights with other squirrels to
So
keep their
yeah,
nest?
so the red squirrels are the most territorial, and they can get really nasty. I have friends who like get really annoyed in their backyard because the red squirrels are always telling them they shouldn't be there, and so they only tolerate the males in the short time that they are mating, and then they're by themselves, and then have their young. The gray squirrels, they tolerate each other enough, but during mating season, they'll tussle a lot. The young fight with each other, but they pretty much it's kind of like raccoons. You'll see a lot of raccoons, particularly in the winter, hanging around together, and then all of a sudden you'll hear all that, all that fighting, and they get into a fight, but they all don't seem to hurt each other. They all tend to tolerate each other, and the flying squirrels are the most gregarious. They do tolerate each other the best. Jan, the best time to see them is, when it's really dark in the woods, not probably in the winter, but, just go to a quiet area in the woods. You can look for a place with a lot of acorns around, and maybe at the bottom of a tree, if you see little, almost mouse-sized poop, those are signs that you might see them. Michael, a lot of these animals, they don't like safflower seed too much. I don't know why. I've never tasted it, but I guess if they were hungry enough. But squirrels in our state are given so many sunflower seeds, they kind of like spit out the other stuff, I think. But like with black bear, if you put what is it, cayenne pepper in it, they don't like that, but birds will still eat it. So there's all different kinds of things that different animals will tolerate or won't tolerate.
I found that's very effective to keep squirrels away, is to buy either you use hot red pepper, or you can buy now packages of red pepper to mix in with your seed, so that the birds can eat it and the squirrels won't.
Right, Shawnee, I was gonna do chipmunks in that part. I during the storm I lost power and it got kind of chunked away, and I was gonna put, I'd written that part, but I didn't get it back, so I apologize. But any of these animals, you just have to make it uncomfortable. You have to have no food sources. You have to plug up all your holes, make a lot of noise. When you're outside, if they dig holes, I know Sharon said she dug holes. She had holes and she covered them up, and the next day the rocks were gone. So you might have to use those, what are those building blocks called? Something like that.
Cinder blocks.
Yeah, cinder blocks. So it's very hard to get them to move away. I would obviously recommend to please not use poison. We're having a lot of trouble with rodenticides being used, a lot of bald eagles, a lot of other animals are dying from secondhand poisoning. And don't let anybody tell you there's not secondhand poisoning with these poisons. There are. So you can just like get yourself armed for battle, and whenever you see them, just make it uncomfortable. If you see places along your they like to dig under the side of your house, down in the ground there. There's ways you can put concrete or other type of stuff along the edges of your house to dissuade that. So I mean, little critters are sometimes hard to get rid of. I don't like mice very much, and I don't like to kill animals, but I can't have them in my house. So when I trap them with the old snap trap, I take them out, put them in the woods, and they're usually gone in 30 minutes. Even chipmunks eat mice. So I figure circle of life, right?
That's right. That is. Well, thank you so much for coming back again.